Something that our media, I think, forget. Our old media, they've forgotten. They've forgotten that when they smear and when they attack people, there are people at the end of it with feelings and families and friends. And we recently, it was the beginning of last year, we found out, or the end of the year before, we found out about the whole Integrity Initiative affair. And this is a Foreign and Commonwealth Office funded charity, um, which I'm saying that very mildly, which is basically, by the look of it, well, it's like Mockingbird on steroids, and they have all sorts of people. You mentioned the smear campaign earlier, and the hollowing out of institutions, and they've got all sorts of, not just reporters but academics, etc., that they can go to publish and push out whatever propaganda that they want pushed out, not just in this country, around the world as well. They stopped a guy in Spain, I believe, the Integrity Initiative did, from getting a defence job in Spain, Pedro Baños, because he'd been on RT and he'd said things on RT that made sense. This is a propaganda construct that's set up like this. But I mean, you've been smeared pretty badly, haven't you? You and the working group of Syria Propaganda and Media, by members of this Integrity Initiative and their cluster. Can you tell me about that, and tell me, how I suppose you've managed to keep going through this campaign against you, because it has been pretty sick.
Well, I mean, the Integrity Initiative was seems to have been a fledgling sort of propaganda operation, which has been possibly nipped in the bud, but now sort of altered to
change
a
name
version, a replacement version kind of thing. But the Integrity Initiative was a pretty sort of transparent. Let's try to integrate academics, journalists, and then political advisors into these kind of sort of little epistemic communities who know what the truth is and what the lies are, etc. Basically, most of it, from what we could see from documentation, was based around pushing this new Cold War against Russia line and so on, getting people to think along those lines. Now, I mean, that in relation to us and the smears that we've been subjected to, I mean, there's been some overlap with Integrity Initiative. I think the initial Times attack on the academics, which was published on the day that we were bombing Syria following the Duma attack, funnily enough.
It published on the day.
Yeah, published on the day.
Talk about getting their ducks in a row.
Sorry?
They're getting their ducks in a row, weren't they?
Yeah. There was overlap between journalists involved in that. Some of them turned up in the Integrity Initiative documents, and the question was put to the journalists: well, were you connected to the Integrity Initiative? And they refused to answer the question. I have all that on record. That will be written about at some point for an academic paper. I think, really specifically in relation to us, I think that the reason why we have been smeared so heavily, it's obviously the Huffington Post has focused 12 articles on us in various ways, 12 articles by one journalist.
I hope he must get paid very well, Piers.
In addition to the Times. I think that the problem is that we have been treading on the toes of UK FCO propaganda operations in relation to the ongoing war in Syria. And I think that as soon as certain actors became aware that there were academics looking at things such as the white helmets and the chemical weapons attacks, I mean, my suspicion would be that the decision was made that we have to stop these people talking about this right now. And so from day one, we were having smear pieces written about us by Brian Whitaker was writing smear pieces for his blog. And then the Times newspaper attacked, and then that kicked off a whole just 12 articles from the Huffington Post. And to me, this looks as though it's driven, it's motivated. If it's not driven and motivated by sort of UK foreign policy agenda, then it's pretty extraordinary journalism.
That's actually worse.
Journalism going on there.
Yeah, it's worse if it's not actually told that if they're doing this on their own. It's even worse, isn't it? Because I mean, is it Chomsky says, doesn't he, the ability of the Western media to fall in line with their government is something that dictators would think was wonderful, isn't it?
I mean, my feeling is that there's something more. I mean, there is bits of evidence here and there and so on, which we'll disclose in the fullness of time, which suggests that it is quite deliberate and concerted in terms of trying to close us down. And I do think that if you start to pull together the whole mass of Twitter and social media activity, you can start to see fairly clear patterns in relation to that. But the most important thing about this attack on the academics, and of course it's been a very focused attack on academics in leading institutions, smearing them as, you know, Russian propagandists, Assad apologists, etc., is that the key issue that they're talking about, yeah, and have been talking about, is an issue that OPCW scientists are talking about, okay? So, and also Peter Hitchens, of course, a mainstream journalist, talking about it. So there is absolutely no justification for these allegations that this is a group of academics who've got no reason to be saying anything about these issues. There's no justification whatsoever. That is patently not, obviously not the case. We are saying things. Actually, we're saying things that General West was indicating.
Yes.
Okay. We are saying things that OPCW scientists are now saying, and one has said in public at the UN Security Council. So there's no justification for these smears from Huffington Post or from the Times. No justification whatsoever. They should be apologizing for what they've done. And I think, you know, and I have to admit, it's got to a point where it's just laughable now. I mean, it's every time we get attacked, it just draws more attention to the issue, more attention to us. We might suffer personally because of those attacks, but the truth and the truth of what has been going on doesn't suffer. Just it draws more attention. More people start to realize what has been going on. So in that sense, you know, the attacks, it's always a desperate thing, smearing people, in the sense that, you know, you can't win the argument, so you just have to smear them. You have to try and discredit them.
Yeah,
and of course, these things do work politically, and in the short term they work, but they don't work in the long term.
No,
not when people come back and look at this and say, look at this group of academics here. They were saying exactly what those OPCW scientists were saying, and look at the punishment that was meted out to them by certain parts of the establishment and so on, by certain media. You know, they're going to look very, very, very bad in the fullness of time in relation to their activity. And the smears, as I say, there might be sort of personal pressures and costs created by them and so on. And it's not nice being smeared in public, etc. Yeah. But the truth, and getting the truth out there, that doesn't ultimately suffer with smears. Ultimately, you know, people become more determined.
Yeah.
And you can see that quite clearly at the moment. I think there was an element of determination in the face of Ian Henderson when he was talking to the UN Security Council. He's not going to go away. It rallies people to push for the truth.
Yeah, it makes them more resolute.
People doing the smearing should keep that in mind, and keep in mind what the long term is going to be with all of this in terms of public awareness and in terms of the truth coming out.